The bridge of the Imperial flagship shook with a violent force. Metal plates groaned as the ship tilted. Red emergency lights pulsed against the thick smoke filling the room. Outside the reinforced glass, the sky was a wall of fire. A nearby moon was cracking open. Millions of silver shapes covered the moon like a living carpet. These shapes looked like liquid metal. They were tearing the moon into dust to feed their hunger. Empress Vala gripped the edge of the command table. Her knuckles were white. Her crown was crooked on her head. She did not look like a powerful ruler. She looked like a trapped animal. She watched the tactical screen. Her golden fleet was disappearing. Each green dot on the map turned red and then vanished. The Predator swarm did not use lasers or missiles. It moved like a storm of tiny blades. It stripped the armor from massive ships in seconds. It left nothing but scrap. A captain screamed for the engines to start. He wanted to run. Vala turned to the main communication console and pushed the officer aside. She opened a wide broadcast to every ship and every station in the system. Her voice was high and jagged with fear. She did not hide the danger. She made the offer. She said she would give away the planet Oakhaven. It was the jewel of the Empire. It was a world of blue oceans and deep forests. It was worth more than 1,000 star systems. She said the deed would belong to the person who stopped the swarm. She promised a whole world to anyone who could tame the Predator. The radio stayed silent. Only the sound of static and dying ships came through the speakers. A group of famous alien mercenaries appeared on a small screen. They were in heavy warships with big guns. Their leader shook his head. He said no planet was worth a slow death. The mercenary ships turned away. They burned their engines and jumped into warp. They left the Empress behind to die. Vala looked at her personal guards. These were men trained for war since birth. They looked at the screen and stepped back. They saw the silver wave moving toward them. The swarm was now a mile long. It was coming for the flagship. The outer shields of the ship began to spark and hiss. The sound of metal hitting metal echoed through the hall. It sounded like heavy rain on a tin roof. A man walked out from the shadows of the rear deck. His name was Leo Thorne. He was not a soldier or a noble. He was a low-level pilot who moved cargo for the army. His flight suit was stained with oil and grease. He had a thin scar across his nose. He was a man who had spent his life in the dark corners of the galaxy. He walked past the armed guards. His boots made a hollow thud on the metal floor. Leo looked at the Empress. He told her he would take the deal. He said he would save the planet. The bridge grew quiet. The officers stared at him. They thought he was a fool. Vala looked at his dirty face and his steady hands. She asked him where his army was. She asked what secret weapons he had hidden in his ship. Leo did not have an army. He told her he had a shuttle and a plan. He said he was tired of being poor and tired of running. He did not look like a hero. He looked like a man who was making one final bet. He told her to give him the deed or he would leave the bridge. The hull screamed as the Predator scouts began to chew through the outer skin of the ship. Vala grabbed a digital pad. She typed the code to transfer the planet. She handed the pad to Leo. Her fingers brushed his, and they were cold. She told him that if he failed, there would be no world left to own. Leo took the pad and turned. He ran toward the hangar bay. He did not say goodbye. He reached his small, battered shuttle and jumped inside. The engines coughed and then roared. The hangar doors slid open to the black void of space. The void was filled with the silver swarm. Leo gripped the controls and steered his small ship directly into the center of the killing cloud. The shuttle screamed as it hit the thick air of Oakhaven. Leo gripped the vibrating stick with both hands. His knuckles were white. The cockpit smelled like burnt wires and sweat. Behind him, the silver swarm was a fast shadow in the clouds. He looked at the radar. Thousands of tiny blips were closing in. They did not fly like ships. They moved like a single, hungry mind. The ship slammed into the ground in a green meadow. Grass and dirt flew into the air. Leo did not wait for the dust to settle. He kicked the emergency release on the cargo door. The heavy metal ramp dropped with a loud bang. He ran into the back of the shuttle. 3 tall pillars of black metal stood in the shadows. They were covered in old scratches and strange wires. These were the signal towers he had found in the dead sector. Leo pushed a heavy cart toward the ramp. The first tower was on it. He strained against the weight. His boots slipped on the wet grass. He had to move fast. He could hear high humming sound from the sky. It was the sound of 1,000,000 metallic wings rubbing together. A sound made his teeth ache. He reached the center of the clearing and hammered a spike into the ground. He locked the first tower into place. He ran back for the second. His heart was hitting his ribs like a drum. He looked up. A scout from the swarm dropped through the clouds. It was the size of a car. It looked like a knot of silver snakes. It landed 100 yards away and began to vibrate. The grass around it turned to gray ash instantly. Leo did not have a gun. He had a metal cable. He reached behind his head and pulled back the collar of his flight suit. A small metal port was built into the bone at the top of his spine. He took the cable from the tower and pushed it into the port. A sharp spike of pain shot through his brain. His vision went white for a second. He fell to his knees and gasped for air. In orbit, Empress Vala watched the video feed. She sat in her command chair on the damaged flagship. The screens showed the green beauty of Oakhaven. They also showed the black dot that was Leo. She saw him shaking on the ground. She saw the silver scout moving toward him. One of her officers told her to cut the feed. The officer said the human was dead and the planet was lost. Vala did not look away. She saw Leo stand up. Leo's eyes were bloodshot. He could feel the swarm now. It was not a voice. It was a cold hunger that wanted to eat the world. He flipped the switch on the tower. The black pillar began to glow with a dim blue light. The scout stopped its vibration. It twisted its body toward the tower. It seemed confused. Leo grabbed the second tower and dragged it into position. He was crying from the pain in his neck. Every time the tower pulsed, his nerves felt like they were on fire. He was not a soldier. He was a man who felt every bit of the agony. He plugged the second cable into the tower. The wind began to howl. The sun disappeared. Leo looked up, and his face went pale. The clouds were gone. The entire sky was now a solid roof of silver. The main hive ship was coming down. It was miles wide. It blocked out the light of the sun. The shadow fell over the forests and the oceans. The predator was here to eat Oakhaven. Leo held the final cable in his hand, and his body began to shake. Leo fell onto his back as the blue light from the towers turned into a blinding flash. The cable in his spine felt like a red-hot needle. He could not move his legs. He looked up at the sky. The massive silver hive ship was so close, he could see the individual plates of its hull shifting. It looked like a sea of knives. The humming sound in his head became a series of fast clicks. It was data. It was thousands of years of old commands. In the flagship above, Empress Vala stared at a glowing dial on her console. The signal from Leo's towers was growing. It was not just stopping the swarm. It was starting to command it. A general stood next to her. He pointed at the screen. He said that if a low-level pilot controlled the swarm, he would be more powerful than the Empress. Vala felt a cold wave of panic. She did not want to be saved if it meant losing her throne. She ordered her elite guard to land on Oakhaven. She told them to take the towers and kill anyone who got in the way. 2 sleek black dropships screamed through the clouds. They did not fire at the silver swarm. They fired at the ground near Leo's shuttle. The dirt exploded. Leo felt the ground shake. He turned his head and saw the Imperial guards jumping from the ships. They wore heavy power armor. They carried long plasma rifles. They moved toward the towers with their weapons raised. Leo reached for a small remote on his belt. His fingers were shaking so hard, he almost dropped it. He pushed a button. 4 small turrets popped out from the top of his shuttle. They began to spray bullets at the guards. The guards hid behind the legs of the towers. They fired back. Blue plasma bolts melted the side of Leo's shuttle. The air smelled like ozone and burning plastic. Leo's mind was still connected to the swarm. He closed his eyes and saw what the swarm saw. It did not see a planet to eat. It saw a giant house that was empty. The code in Leo's brain was a series of errors. The swarm was a security system. It was a guard dog that had forgotten who its master was. It was attacking everything because it thought everything was an intruder. A guard officer reached the first tower. He placed an explosive charge on its base. He looked at Leo and yelled for him to disconnect. Leo shook his head. He tried to speak, but only a dry sob came out. If the tower blew up, the signal would break. The swarm would stop being confused and start killing again. The silver scouts in the air began to dive. They were attracted to the heat of the guards' plasma rifles. A cloud of silver blades hit the second dropship. The ship twisted and slammed into the forest. It turned into a ball of orange fire. The guards near Leo started shooting at the sky. They were screaming now. They were caught between Leo's turrets and the falling swarm. The guard officer ignored the silver blades. He held his rifle and aimed it at Leo's chest. He did not care about the swarm anymore. He only cared about his orders. He told Leo that the Empress wanted the planet back. He pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt missed Leo's heart, but hit his shoulder. Leo screamed and his body jerked. The cable in his spine pulled tight. The hive ship above opened a massive hatch. A beam of pure white light hit the center of the meadow. The ground turned to glass. Leo felt his mind being pulled out of his body and into the hive ship. He was no longer a man. He was a part of the machine. He looked through the eyes of the hive and saw the Empress's flagship in orbit. The hive ship's weapons began to charge. Leo realized he was now the one aiming at the Empress. The white light from the hive ship burned Leo's skin. He lay on the glass ground of the meadow. Blood soaked the shoulder of his flight suit. He could not feel his legs anymore. The cable in his spine was humming. In his mind, he was no longer a human on a planet. He was a ghost inside a machine. He saw the galaxy through thousands of silver eyes. He saw the Empress's flagship hanging in space like a golden toy. He saw the weapons of the hive ship lock onto her bridge. On the flagship, the walls were shaking. Warning sirens screamed a high, flat note. Empress Vala looked at the tactical map. The hive ship was bigger than a city. It was charging a beam that would melt her ship and everyone inside. Her face was twisted with anger and fear. She did not want to die. She did not trust Leo. She grabbed the radio and spoke to her entire fleet. She gave the order to fire every orbital cannon at Leo's location. She said the human was a traitor who was working with the swarm. The sky over Oakhaven turned a deep, angry red. Massive beams of energy shot down from the clouds. They were not aiming at the silver swarm. They were aiming at the blue light of the signal towers. The first beam hit the forest a mile away. Trees turned to dust instantly. The shockwave threw the Imperial guards into the air. The guard officer who had shot Leo was crushed under his own falling dropship. Leo felt the impact in his brain. The neural link carried the vibration of the planet into his skull. He saw the main processor of the hive ship. It was a sphere of liquid light at the center of the silver ship. It was trying to fight him. It wanted to consume. It wanted to eat the flagship and then eat the planet. Leo grabbed a digital file in his mind. This was the virus. It was a command to stop the hunger. It was a command to sleep. He pushed the file into the liquid light. His vision turned red. It felt like hot oil was pouring into his ears. He screamed, but no sound came out of his mouth. On the ground, his body was jerking and hitting the glass. The signal towers began to smoke. The metal was melting from the heat of the orbital strike. Another beam from space hit the meadow. It landed only 50 yards from Leo. The ground exploded into a wall of fire and dirt. Leo was thrown into the air. The cable in his spine snapped tight. He was hanging by the wire. He used his last bit of strength to complete the upload. He forced the virus into the hive's core. The silver hive ship stopped moving. Its weapons went dark. The clicking sound in Leo's head turned into a long, low moan. The millions of silver scouts in the sky began to fall. They did not fly anymore. They dropped like heavy rain. They hit the trees and the water with loud splashes. In the flagship, Vala saw the threat vanish. The hive ship was dead in space. She told her crew to stop the orbital strike. The red beams in the sky faded away. The smoke over Oakhaven was thick and black. Vala looked at the screen. The meadow was a smoking hole in the ground. There was no sign of the signal towers. There was no sign of the human. Leo opened his eyes. He was lying in the mud. He was still alive, but he felt different. He looked at his hands. They were gray. He tried to remember the name of the Empress, but the name was gone. He tried to remember the smell of the forest, but he could only smell cold metal. He heard a sound coming from the dark sky. It was not the swarm. It was something older. It was calling to him. He realized the virus had not just stopped the swarm. It had changed him into one of them. The rain on Oakhaven was black with soot. It washed the ash from the burnt trees into the gray rivers. Empress Vala stepped off her shuttle and onto the glass ground of the meadow. Her boots made a sharp clicking sound. She wore a heavy respirator mask. The air smelled like melted lead and dead electricity. Behind her, 20 guards held their rifles ready. They did not look at the beautiful forests. They looked at the sky. The silver ring of the dormant swarm hung in the air above the planet. It was a giant circle of cold metal. It did not move. It did not eat. It was a graveyard of a billion machines. Vala walked toward the center of the meadow. She saw a man sitting on a piece of charred metal. It was Leo. He was staring at his hands. His skin was the color of a rainy sky. Small wires moved like worms under the surface of his neck. Vala stopped 10 feet away. She pulled the digital deed from her belt. She threw it onto the ground at his feet. She told him the planet was his. She said he was the richest man in the empire. Her voice was cold and sharp. She did not thank him. She looked at his gray face with disgust. She saw that he was no longer the man who had walked onto her bridge. Leo did not pick up the deed. He did not look at the paper that made him a king. He looked up at Vala. His eyes were not brown anymore. They were flat silver discs. He told her that he could still feel the hive ship. He said the virus had changed the code. The swarm was not dead. It was just waiting. He told her that he could feel the hunger inside his own stomach. He wanted to eat the metal of her shuttle. He wanted to tear the armor from her guards. A guard shifted his weight and his armor clanked. Leo's head snapped toward the sound. His jaw tightened. He looked like a predator about to spring. Vala stepped back. She realized she had not tamed a beast. She had created a new one. She told her guards to prepare to leave. She wanted to get off this planet before Leo changed his mind. A loud beep sounded from the console on Leo's wrist. It was a long, slow signal. It did not come from the Imperial fleet. It did not come from the planet. Leo stood up. His movements were too smooth and too fast. He looked at the dark space beyond the silver ring. He told the Empress to wait. He said the swarm was a security system. He finally understood why it was built. It was not built to attack the galaxy. It was built to keep something else out. The swarm was a fence. By uploading the virus, Leo had opened the gate. A massive shadow moved across the stars. It was larger than the hive ship. It was a shape of pure darkness that did not reflect any light. The black soot rain began to fall harder. The ground began to vibrate with a deep, low frequency. It was a heartbeat. Leo looked at the digital deed in the mud. He realized the planet was worthless if there was no one left to live on it. He looked at Vala, and his silver eyes flashed. He told her to run to her ship. He said the thing that the swarm was afraid of had finally arrived. In the distance, the first of the silver scouts in the ring began to glow with a red, angry light. They were waking up, but they were not listening to Leo anymore.